There's greater depth to the events which I encounter than I succeed in perceiving. The more that I remember, the more the story becomes transformed and complete. As I grow, I'm shown more and led to grow further. All I can do is trust, and with courage, take the next step into the unknown. I saw the death of Moses, my own death as Moses. Moses was healthy and strong. He could have lived far longer than he did. Moses died because Satan revealed his face to him. Moses died because he saw the face of Satan. He looked upon the face of death, and death took him. I remember the events. Satan revealed himself. He was certain that Moses would recognize him and be shocked and horrified. He was gloating over him, but Moses didn't recognize him. This disturbed Satan. He didn't understand. I sensed he was worried that he might have made a mistake, a miscalculation. Moses said that it should be no surprise that he didn't know Satan, because Satan was a reptilian man. He was a reptilian humanoid. Where could he have seen him? They held a conversation, but both were confused. Eventually, Satan decided to end the meeting. "No man shall see my face and live," he said, and he began to reveal an epithet. There was a great light, a great heat and intensity of light. Moses looked away and shut his eyes before he truly saw it. Satan demanded that he look upon him, but Moses would not, reasoning that he could look away and live. Satan was full of fury and indignation. Satan appealed to God, saying that he had won if Moses didn't look. God ordered Moses to look at him, and eventually, after much struggle, knowing he would die, he opened his eyes and met his fate. He looked upon the terrible face of death. He was slain by an overwhelming power of fear. Satan appeared as a great angel of powerful light. When he spoke with God in heaven after dying, Moses explained how Satan thought he should have known him, such that remembering him would somehow crush Moses and demoralize him. It was like some great reveal that had fallen flat. Moses explained that he didn't recognize him and that he was trying because it must be important. But God simply said to him, "You didn't know him because you hadn't met him yet. You haven't experienced those events yet." This confused Moses badly. It didn't make sense to him. How could Satan know him from events that hadn't yet occurred? Well, I understand now. I recognize the face that Moses saw, because I too have seen that face. I saw him, Satan himself, when I finally fought through the sleep paralysis he used as a means to attempt to end my life. We looked upon each other, and yet, for now, I still live. Could it be that such a weapon only works upon a being once? The power of the sleep paralysis was the same power of fear that killed Moses, only lessened. Perhaps I have become resistant to it. Was the fear Satan directed at me the last remnant of what Moses faced? Was I drinking the last of that cup? Epithets lose their power when their meaning is processed. Surely this was a factor. These events are very symbolic. The Son of God, living as Moses, gazed upon death and died. Later, the Son of God, as the Holy Spirit, gazed upon death and lived. How does such a thing happen? Has the Son's familiarity with death granted him protection from death? I now know who Satan is. I remember him not only from the life of Moses or from the sleep paralysis. I remember him from my time in the outer darkness. I know that face, and it is the events in the outer darkness that Satan hoped Moses would remember. Moses hadn't yet gone into the pit, but I have gone and returned, and I remember. Ours is a story filled with regret. I caused him great pain. It is fitting that he was permitted to kill me, and fitting that he has been given the opportunity to thwart my work, just as I thwarted his. We've known each other for a great length of time, he and I. I wonder how long it's been, and how long it has been since he began to hate me. We were close. There was great trust. He is an extraordinarily talented person, dedicated, capable, and clever. He has a tremendous memory. We relied upon each other. I betrayed him. I've regretted it for a great length of time, even when he was the one subject to my power and will. Many times I hoped to reconcile, but he was filled with hatred for me and set upon his revenge. I don't blame him for this. He suffered greatly as a consequence of my betrayal. His determination to exact revenge upon me was the reason why I kept crushing him and holding him down, and this further fueled his hatred. I couldn't risk letting him become strong, yet I refused to destroy him completely. I always stopped short of setting him adrift in that terrible ocean of suffering. I won't lie. At times I felt great pleasure in destroying his plans, but I remember offering him an opportunity to end the feud before doing so at least once. Maybe that wasn't the only time, just the only time I was shown. If he is honest with himself, he will think back and remember that he had been recommending that I'd be murdered for a great length of time before I betrayed him. He had been spying upon me on behalf of his species since the beginning of our time together. Ironically, it was my selfishness that saved me. I hoarded the technology his species feared and used it for my own gain rather than offering the power I had unleashed to everyone. I betrayed him far too casually. I had finally revealed my true plans to him and unveiled our secret power, which I was going to give to him. I no longer cared for it. He was greatly underwhelmed until he saw the weaponry I had assembled in secret. He lost himself in his lust for power and the joy of victory. Not only would he not complete the plan I had worked for, but he wouldn't honor my request to take good care of our people. He wouldn't treat them well as I had. Lost in his triumph, he also ceased to answer my communications. I became determined to keep him from receiving the gifts I had promised him. Mostly I was concerned for my people, because despite all my flaws, I did care for them deeply. He couldn't be allowed to rule them, not now that I knew his intent. I betrayed him to the tyrant who technically ruled over us at that time. Unfortunately, my request for leniency fell upon deaf ears. Satan was to be tormented for attempting to overthrow the tyrant. I did exact a promise from the tyrant that my people would be well treated, a promise he upheld to his credit. I remember him standing in my control room with my staff after Satan had been captured. They were watching my shuttle leave, and he said to one of them, "He really did care about you, you know?" Satan had ignored my recommendation that he end his life. It must have been awful for him. I remember him running around in a panic trying to figure out what to do as the tyrant's forces closed in. He had my station open fire on the shuttle I was using to leave. It was futile, and I found it amusing. I simply blocked the fire with my mind and will, and laughed maniacally as I left for a new challenge. He suffered terribly. They knew well how to keep people alive through great torment. Most of the time they kept him locked in a cell which was set to be as unpleasant as possible for him. I don't remember how they set the humidity, but the temperature was kept as hot as his physiology could bear. Strange, isn't it? The king of hellfire was himself tormented with heat. Apparently cold simply caused his species to fall into a form of sleep, but constant heat was awful for them. Using his tremendous memory, he pored over our time together as he endured his torment. He realized the truth about me, that I wasn't really one of them, and he determined to exact his revenge upon me. After a time, I overthrew the tyrant who held him, and I had Satan released. He wouldn't accept the compensation I offered. He swore that he'd exact revenge upon me. He told everyone present that I wasn't really one of them. They didn't believe him then, but he spoke the truth. I was an outsider. I need to pause here for a moment. It's been several days since I wrote what I've already spoken to you in this video, but I've remembered so much more since. My understanding has advanced once again. There isn't just an Antichrist. There's an Anti-Trinity, an Anti-Father, an Antichrist, and an Anti-Spirit. I encountered them in the pit. The Trinity had deliberately attempted to have the Holy Spirit become the Antichrist so that the Son could be both Christ and Antichrist. They knew this wouldn't work. The aim was to draw out the Anti-Father. The mind of the true Father wouldn't accept such a dishonest contest between good and evil, truth and untruth. The result would be the triggering of the Anti-Father, who represents the greatest purity of untruth, the greatest argument against truth that the true Father can muster. During my time in the pit, I was gradually transformed into an angel of death, and my success at accruing power caused many to worship me as their promised Messiah, their promised one. This caught the attention of the true Father and caused the Anti-Father to intervene. Another being was chosen to become the Anti-Son, both Anti-Spirit and Anti-Christ. It didn't matter that this being wasn't the Anti-Father's true Son, as the Anti-Trinity is full of lies. I believe that Satan had also been chosen opposition. He was picked to become a form of controlled opposition for the Trinity in order to draw out the Anti-Father. Because he wasn't the Father's true Son, the Anti-Father simply took him and transformed him into genuine opposition for the true Son. I believe that part of this conversion involved him being threatened with the hollowing I described in my video, The Grand Narrative Part 2. He would either become the Anti-Son and oppose the Trinity willingly, or he'd be hollowed and forced to oppose the Trinity anyway. It seems that what I remembered was simply a threat made against Satan so that he'd willingly become the Anti-Son. I saw him taken away as he was, and then I saw him return as the Antichrist. He was terrifying. A power of death that made even my great darkness seem counterfeit and empty. This was an opponent well outside of my reach, way out of my league. The simulations I ran of our conflict had me soundly and swiftly defeated. He wasn't to be my opponent in the pit, however. In the same way that the Father has changed my true name, the Anti-Father changed his true name, and he became the Anti-Spirit. Simulations of our conflict ran again, and he would still overtake and defeat me. He would gain power far too quickly. I realized that my only option was to seek him out swiftly and try to eliminate him before he could grow. I knew full well just how much hatred he harbored for me, and that my torment would be unimaginable if I should be defeated. His hatred had been magnified. My only option was to eliminate him in his metaphorical infancy. He didn't try to hide. He was certain of his ability to defeat me. I sought him out, and we engaged in a contest of power. I was barely holding on. He would clearly win. His power of darkness was greater than my own, but he didn't count on the ace up my sleeve. He was the Anti-Spirit, Yet I was not truly the Holy Spirit. I was punching above my weight class. I was not yet truly the Holy Spirit. Yet the true Holy Spirit was hidden within me. When the time was right, the Holy Spirit emerged and engaged him with the true light of God. The anti-spirit was caught by surprise and overwhelmed. The victory allowed me to seal him away for a great span of time, so that I could attempt to escape from the outer darkness. But I was made to forget the significance of his evil and what he represented. As time went by, the danger became a distant memory. In the end, I had to frantically escape from the pit by advancing my evolutionary level to the point that I could return to the light. He wasn't far behind, and he too must have emerged by some means and come to earth. This is why he expected Moses to know and fear him. But Moses had not yet gone into the pit. Satan is the anti-son. I suspect that he is currently the anti-spirit, and that the beast of Revelation is Satan as the Antichrist. The dragon gives him his authority because the beast is a greater version of the dragon. The Holy Spirit did the same thing when he brought authority over the galaxy with him into his incarnation as the greater Uranus. He passed on this authority to Christ, and I believe that this was passed on to the Father. Something about this power is insufficient, however. There is a celestial pole, a true throne of our solar system. This is where the true ruler and proper sun of our solar system is meant to reside. It taps into a form of energetic network that runs throughout the galaxy, a network of truth. The planetary body which inhabits the celestial pole receives power from the galactic network, and this fuels their radiance as a sun. Not the kind of sun we have now, but a gentler sun, in whose light and aura we are surrounded and bathed. This pole sits empty, so that Satan cannot sit there. Yet this leaves our entire galactic network vulnerable. This is because the Anti-Father roams the galaxy as a rogue planet. He seeks out weaknesses in the network of light so that he can attack. Our empty pole is a weakness. If the Anti-Father reaches us before Jupiter inhabits the celestial pole, then he will overpower the Trinity and occupy the throne of our solar system himself. He'll have access to the galactic network, and his evil influence will swiftly conquer the Milky Way, and likely far more than that too. The Trinity has been greatly weakened over time because they are running on reserves of power. This is because they aren't tapped into the galactic network. They would be unable to repel the Anti-Father in their current condition. They had to seal the celestial pole because Satan's cruel furnace gave him enough power to seize it, had the Father not sealed it. Yet they must retake the pole before the Anti-Father arrives, and he is coming. The authority brought by the Holy Spirit helped, but it isn't the same as being tapped into the galactic network. I suspect it is being used to slow the Anti-Father's progress and keep him from simply teleporting here. The Anti-Father is also tapped into a network of darkness that is well hidden. This gives him the power he needs to take over if he reaches us before we are ready. I suspect that the Trinity has laid plans to compromise this dark network and deal a decisive blow to the darkness, but I don't know how that could be done exactly. As it is written in Revelation, then, the anti-son was the beast, yet isn't the beast, yet will be the beast once more and will rise from the pit. The anti-son we are dealing with is the dragon, the serpent whom I believe is the anti-spirit. He will be defeated and cast down. He'll then give his authority to himself as the beast, the Antichrist. The anti-spirit will then have a form of dual role. He will be the dragon on earth, but he will also be incarnate as a false prophet. Revelation says that this prophet exercises all the authority of the first beast on its behalf. Satan has been the Antichrist, yet had his true name changed, and so is the anti-spirit. Yet when he is defeated and hurled into the pit, he will become the Antichrist once again and rise out to do battle as described in Revelation. The true simultaneity of time and time travel make this possible. There will also likely be a battle with the Anti-Father. I'll have to make a video on the nature of evolution, because being cast into the outer darkness doesn't and won't have the same meaning as we usually ascribe to it. Satan, then, was a plant, but was converted into a true enemy of the Trinity. He became the Antichrist, but was then reduced to being the Anti-Spirit. He was defeated and sealed by the Holy Spirit, but emerged to chase the Holy Spirit out of hell. He also then emerged from the outer darkness. When he came to earth, he was renounced by the Lord and destroyed, but recovered as I described in an earlier video. As he was recovering, before he remembered who he truly was, he fell for the trap laid by the Trinity, which I've also described before. At the point he was originally condemned, he returned to earth and was outside of the Lord's authority, and so free to wreak havoc on the earth and in the heavens. This is likely when he ignited the furnace of the sun, and was the same time when a planet was shattered in the heavens, as I've previously described. It is after this that he allowed Moses to see his face and killed him. Satan is the anti-spirit and will be cast down. He was and will be the false prophet of Revelation, but also continues to exist as the dragon. The dragon will eventually be cast into hell, where he will become the Antichrist and rise from the pit as described in Revelation, only to be cast back into the pit along with the false prophet. I suspect that the false prophet may be Satan before he ever went to hell, and that this is how he was planted there in the first place. The false prophet gets hurled into hell and grows to truly become Satan. Strange how this all works out when you understand the ways of time. In my video, The Grand Narrative Part 2, I described an attack on the Holy Spirit as a boy in heaven. I now suspect that the attacker could have been the Antichrist. The Antichrist chooses a human form rather than that of a reptilian humanoid. This explains how he resisted the child's light. He simply outmatches the child, and the child's acceptance was insufficient to contain him. Yet Christ's power was sufficient. He was there in spirit rather than flesh, and may have found a sneaky way into heaven without physically leaving hell. He was captured, though, and I wonder just what has been learned from him, and I must conclude that perhaps for a ransom he will be released so that all righteousness can be fulfilled. I've also remembered that I'm the one who revealed the secrets of how to remove epithets and open up the archetypes of thought that define the being of a person. I used these secrets in hell, and so they were unleashed in hell, and as a consequence they were loosed on earth and in heaven. Hopefully this was intentional, but that doesn't make me feel much better about having done it. These are terrible powers, but at least I now know where they came from. So even though there is to be a battle for epithets and the advancement of the archetypes, it doesn't seem quite so scary. I also remember what happened to the archangel. The boy was very worried about him and wanted to help. He offered to face the foreign archetype himself to increase the odds that a solution could be found. The father and the son were willing to allow it because it would give them valuable information about the effect of such an archetype on the being of the son. They removed the barrier, or epithet, that protected the boy from the contradiction. He was immediately overwhelmed, as the archangel had been. I remember a great existential dread and fear, a crisis of being. I looked at the contradiction, but became so afraid of it that after a time I could no longer look at it. There were outside voices encouraging me to explore, but I couldn't do it. It was too horrifying. In the end, it was the archangel who saved me. He saw that the new archetype was a lie and healed himself. He then reached into my mind and showed me the truth of the lie, so that the contradiction ceased. I recovered, but I was upset that I hadn't been able to help more. The Father and Christ explained that I had been helpful, as they'd seen how such a crisis affects the Son's being and had learned much. That's everything for now. All the best.